Hi everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IS. I welcome you all on the platform of StudyIQ, and my name is Bhanwar Singh, I'm ex-NDA 115th course, qualified civil services in 2012. And ultimately, I'm very sorry for not holding the class for 2 days because I was not well, still not feeling completely well, but recovering. So I welcome you all on the platform, and ultimately once again we'll be doing the complete the Hindu analysis. We'll be seeing which all articles are important for our preparation for the prelims as well as for the mains as well. And then we'll be doing the complete we'll be taking some of the questions and seeing how these are important for us. All right, so if you're live and you are watching the session, please type in the message and let me know that you're watching the session live. And Brahmachari, hello, good morning. It's Hids. Hello as well, and good morning, Avi. Who else is here? Please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live along with me. All right. So once again, we'll be doing the complete Hindu analysis, and let's see which all important articles are there related to our preparation. Now, the first article that we'll be talking about is about the NEET paper leak. Because this relates to the federalism, examination reforms and the police accountability as well. So over here, Dev, good morning. All right, so over here, this actually pertains to your GS paper 2, where it is about the governance, and even it is important for the ethics as well. All right, the next news that we'll be discussing today, it is basically the state of Hormuz as well as Bab el-Mandeb crisis, where we are talking about two of the important choke points. All right, so again, over here, this pertains to GS paper 2 and 3 as well, because it relates to international relation and the economy. Then we'll be moving ahead and we'll be talking about Jaishankar's Manila Sprint as well, which is where it is about the multi-alignment policy that we are following right now when it comes to the foreign policy, where actually it is about balancing the China as well as Russia and anchoring the Quad as well. Then we'll be talking about the Teesta 6th tunnel blast, where it was about the known risk, and this has met the delayed governance. And again, this is quite important because this pertains to GS paper 3, disaster management and environment. Then we'll be talking about FCRA Amendment Bill 2026 as well. All right, and then we'll be moving ahead with the Rome Declaration, keeping the AI out of the nuclear chain of command. So these are the important articles that we'll be discussing. But before that, let's see which are the articles which are important for your prelims as well as for your mains as well. Now, the first article that is about the NEET protest, police action and the BNS section 163 as well. Now, this is important for your GS paper 2 and GS paper 4. And also, this is quite important for your prelims as well. Then there is the Bab el-Mandeb and the Hormuz maritime crisis that we'll be talking about. Again, important for your both prelims and mains. Then another one is about the Manila, the recent meet of the ASEAN foreign ministers. Then the Sikkim Teesta 6th tunnel blast as well, FCRA Amendment Bill, the Rome Declaration also. Along with this, for the prelims and the mains, there is another news that is about the Kaveri water dispute, or the management authority, which have asked for maintenance of the status quo. And then we'll be talking about, or there is another news as well that is about Assam floods as well in the today's the Hindu, and thereby this is or these are the important articles which are important for your prelims as well as for your mains as well. Apex, good morning. Now, coming to the word of the day that we have for today it is avarice, that is insatiable desire for wealth, or you can say that it is synonym to the greed or the covetousness and the rapacity. So over here, history is filled with the empires undone by avarice. That is its usage that you can find in our today's The Hindu. Now, coming to the first news that we have, there are lots of articles related to the protest that is ongoing, and also the police brutality that was committed over the student protesters which were there in the Jantar Mantar. And ultimately, this is quite important because this pertains to lots of issues. It is about the leak crisis that we have when it comes to the various examinations which are conducted. It is also about the education which is under the concurrent list, or it was added to the concurrent list. Ultimately, it was earlier in the state list, and thereby by the 42nd Amendment Act, it was converted to the concurrent list that we have. And then also it is about the reforms that we are seeking, and even the police accountability as well, that you can relate the news which are there ultimately in our today's The Hindu. Now over here it is quite important because there had been a 3-week-old of the student movement or the Cockroach Janata Party, which have called for the movement for the reforms of the education sector. Now over here it has pulled the courts, the parliament, and even the center-state relationship into the single crisis that we can see over the examinations, integrity, and the crowd control conduct as well. Now, as per the Congress, there had been the 152 of the paper leaks in a decade, and that have affected nearly about 7.5 crore of the students, as per the opposition estimates that had been cited in the parliament as well. Now, this is quite important because ultimately when we are talking about this complete crisis or the news that we have seen ultimately in the past few days. So over here we know that NEET was basically introduced to so that there could be cut in the multiple entrance examination. There could be the end of the capitation fee commercialization as well in the MBBS seats or in the education for the medical as well. Also, this is quite important because NEET was basically introduced to raise the medical admission standards through the merit as well. But however, when it comes to the complete scenario over here, we have seen that there had been recurring paper leaks, whether it is NEET or the CBSE, and even we have seen a near 0 percentile PG cutoffs have undercut the merit rationale the examination was actually built upon. Now, this is quite important because when it comes to Tamil Nadu, so in Tamil Nadu, you will see that there had been twice of the passage of the NEET exemption legislation, and the governor have withheld the assent, and the union government has not engaged substantially as well. Now, this is also very important because ultimately this matter pertains to the federalism debate, where actually the matter or the education was originally, like I said, it was in the state list. It was the entry 11 in the list 2, but then under the 42nd Amendment Act, it was basically made a concurrent list subject, where it is now under the list 3, and it is entry 25 that we are talking about. Now, why this pertains to the federalism debate is because ultimately this pertains to Article 246. Now, Article 246 provides with the legislative power, where the center, the union, as well as the states, they have their respective power for the legislation or for making the laws pertaining to the center and the state list. Also, there is Article 254 that is quite important. Now, over here, when it comes to any of the subject that is placed in the concurrent list, both the center and the states, they have the power to make the laws. But at the same time, when it comes to the perspective over here, you can see that the center has the supremacy when it comes to the laws which are made under the concurrent list. And that is why this is quite important. It is also important about the section 163 of the BNS. Please remember that there was earlier the CRPC section 144 that was there, and now when it comes to the section 163, this is about the prohibitory orders that can be levied because of the law and order issue. Now, also there had been a precedent. There was a case in 2012 in the Supreme Court, the Ram Leela Maidan versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court have directed the government to formulate the SOPs or the standard operating procedures on the protest guidelines or the protest policing, but ultimately these had not yet been formulated so far. This also pertains to AIQ or All India Quota as well, because ultimately this was Supreme Court created, where the center, the state had to ultimately divert their seats. They had to divert their seats towards the central pool, where actually states, they surrender nearly about, they actually divert their 15% of the undergraduate and 50% of their postgraduate seats to the center pool, and that was decided by the Supreme Court itself. Now, this is quite important because ultimately there had been a case that was filed. There were lots of petitions and the PILs which were filed in the Delhi High Court. And now Delhi High Court have sought the center and the Delhi police response as well, where it is about the excessive force during the CJP or the Cockroach Janata Party's march, or the Chalo Sansad march over the NEET UG report, the paper leak that was there. Now, this is also very important because ultimately when it comes to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court also, there was a PIL that was being heard. But at the same time, when it comes to the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of India, Surya Kant, have declined the suo motu cognizance of this alleged police violence, and he have said that don't waste our time. That is what the bench have said ultimately. Now, this is also very important because ultimately this is about the recent fast that was or that is ongoing by the activist Sonam Wangchuk, where actually we had the government ministers, we have JP Nadda and Jitendra Singh, who have engaged with the Sonam Wangchuk, who is there in the ICU, and they have offered the discussion on the accountability, and also ultimately they have stopped short of education ministers Dharmendra Pradhan resignation as well. Now, this is also very, very important because this pertains to another, case that was there. It is Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India, where it was laid down that the internet shutdowns, which are there in the parts of Delhi right now, they must be law-backed and proportionate, time-bound, and also least restrictive. Also, the parliament saw the repeated adjournments over the complete issue, where the opposition have sought the Rule 265 adjournment motion. And also there had been the pellet guns and the shock batons which were used by the RAF, and reportedly they were used on the protester, which is quite a first in the Delhi that we have seen in the recent past. Now, this is also very important because the mobile internet, it was suspended in parts of Delhi, and this is as per the Telecommunication Act of 2023 as well. Now, this all important, news that we are seeing, and ultimately we have seen in the previous days over the social media, over the media as well. This pertains to various implications that you can see. And also this raises lots of questions as well. Politically, it is very important because this tests whether an apolitical youth movement, unlike that we have in the case of the Citizenship Amendment Act, or unlike that we had seen in the case of the farmers' protest. So we have a apolitical youth that is protesting in the streets of Delhi, and ultimately we can see that can it be captured by the opposition without alienating its non-partisan base that is there, because ultimately we have seen that the Congress leaders, they have staged a protest outside the residence of the Prime Minister as well. Now, this also raises a question socially because disproportionately it burdens the rural and the first generation and regional language students against the private school or the coaching backed urban aspirants, which is about the equity as compared to uniformity trade-off. And also this raises the ethical questions because ultimately it is about the state's duty to maintain the public order against the proportionate use of the force on the unarmed, largely peaceful protester, including the women and minors. So this actually pertains to lots of questions, whether it is political, whether it is social, and even the ethical as well. Cloud Shinobi, good morning. All right, coming to the next news that we have. Again, this is an editorial that you will see over here. And this is about the recent crisis that we have seen in the West Asia. Now, over here, this is quite important because this pertains to the Hormuz as well as Bab al-Mandeb. The complete editorial is quite important because over here, you will see that this is a second maritime choke point threat that we are talking about, Bab al-Mandeb, which connects the Red Sea route. And this has emerged even as the Strait of Hormuz crisis, it actually continues right now. Now, over here, this jointly endangers the sea lanes carrying the most of India's energy and third of its trade as well. Now, this is very important because ultimately when it comes to Strait of Hormuz, when it comes to the Bab al-Mandeb, so India has ordered that no Indian mariner be deployed on the ships which are there bound to or they are from the Strait of Hormuz, because ultimately we have lost the lives of various seafarers as well. Now, this is very important because ultimately when it comes to the Strait of, the Bab al-Mandeb that we are talking about. So, Iran has actually instructed the Houthis, which are basically its proxies, to close the Bab al-Mandeb Strait if the US, it actually strikes the Iranian power plants, and this as per the Reuters on the 16th of July. Now, this is quite important because yesterday I was going through the news and it was said that there were two of the oil tankers. Basically, they were from the Saudi Arabia and they were carrying the oil from the Saudi. And they actually, took a U-turn and they actually went back after the threatening of the Houthis that they will strike any of the oil tankers that will be carrying the Saudi Arabia's oil. So this is very important because ultimately now we are dealing not with just one crisis, we will be dealing with the two crises if the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, it will be closed as well. Now this is very important because this will compound the ongoing crisis that we are seeing right now. Now Trump has already warned that it will destroy any Iranian bridge or the power plant for every ship that will be hit in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this is 11th consecutive night of the US strikes that we are talking about in Iran. And over here, this editorial, it actually estimates that 1/3 of India's total trade is now risk because of the dual crisis that we are talking about in the choke points. Now, this is very important because there had been precedent. In 2023-24, there were the Houthi attacks which were during the Gaza war that have disrupted the Red Sea trade or the shipping, and it has triggered the Operation Prosperity Guardian and the UNSC resolution 2722 as well. Now, over here, this is very important because right now the US forces, they are concentrated over the Strait of Hormuz. So, if there will be two front war, or there will be two front closure of these straits. Like we will have the Strait of Hormuz that is already under the closure and the shipping had been disrupted. And again, there will be another closure of the Bab el-Mandeb. So over here, this is very important that US forces, they are majorly concentrated over the Strait of Hormuz. So again, over here, there are the apprehensions that earlier there was the Operation Prosperity Guardian that was launched by the US forces, which actually managed to open the Red Sea trade route. But now what will happen? All right, how this will, move ahead. Now, when it comes to Bab el-Mandeb, it actually connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. And from here, we have nearly about 12% of the world trade that happens. And there is nearly about 25% of the container traffic that transits through the Suez Canal route as well. Now, already when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, we know that it connects Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, where we have 1/5 of the global energy trade that happens. And ultimately, the France and Japan, they maintain the naval bases, which is near or it is in the Djibouti that actually adjoins the strait. So it is again very important that France and Japan, they comes very important when it comes to the closure of the Bab el-Mandeb as well. Now, over here, we have the two of the straits that we are talking about. The first one is the Strait of Hormuz. Over here, we have the Strait of Hormuz as well as we have here the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. All right, here we have the Djibouti, where we have the bases of France as well as Japan. And this connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. Over here, it is quite important because ultimately, this becomes a very important map where you have to locate every country that connects to the, Persian Gulf, to the, Arabian Sea, even Gulf of Aden, even Red Sea. And here we have the Mediterranean Sea as well. So this complete map is quite important geopolitically because ultimately we have seen the tensions which are rising in the region. Now, coming to the next news that we have for today is, it is the stable India-China ties will help building the multipolar Asia. Now, this is very important because ultimately in a single day in Manila, India's External Affairs Minister engaged with China, Russia and the Quad as well. Now, this is very important because it is a case study in multi-alignment that we are moving towards to, or India is engaging towards to, because of right now what we are seeing in the case of the West Asian crisis, and also because of the US and China rivalry as well. Now, over here, these meetings, they coincided with the 59th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting that have actually bring the Quad and the ASEAN members or the partners together in Manila. Now, this is very important because ultimately over here, we are talking about the complete perspective where the External Affairs Minister, he have quoted the 2024 Modi-Z Kazan meeting, where actually they have said that the differences, they should not become disputes. And this is the diplomatic reset which have followed after the 2020 Galwan clashes which occurred over the Chinese border. And there had been the years of the border friction that have remained between India and China. At the same time, when it comes to India and Russia, the ties, they remain layered, where we have the defense and the energy dependence that continue. For the defense, we are, one of the important defense partners when it comes to Russia. right from the time immemorial. All right, and also when it comes to the energy dependence, so because of the West Asian crisis, so we have diverted towards the Russian oil as well. We are actually importing the Russian crude oil that we have seen because of the West Asian crisis. So already we see that the dependence will continue even as India voices the concern over the harm to its citizens, which are basically harmed, or they died because of the Ukraine war that is continuing right now. Now, when it comes to the Quad, we have seen in the previous sessions as well that ultimately when it comes to the Quad, it has evolved from the security dialogue that it was there to a broader Indo-Pacific coordination platform. Now, ultimately ultimately this meeting, it was held on the sidelines of the ASEAN. So we can see that the Quad is actually losing its relevance right now. All right, because ultimately the complete platform, it had been downgraded. Now, coming to the next news, it is Sikkim's tunnel tragedy toll rises to 15. Now, there had been a tragedy that have occurred in Teesta 6th tunnel. Now, this is quite important because when it comes to the 2024 engineering paper that was prepared by NHPC, that is National Hydropower Corporation of India Limited, so it had already flagged that there had been repeated flammable gas encounters in the very tunnel that exploded on 20th of July, and this have killed 15 of the workers which are there, and this is a textbook case of the documented risk as compared to the implementation failure as well. Now, at least 15 of these workers, they have died, and there are total 25 trapped workers. The tunnel's head race, it sections about 13.7 kilometers each through the seismic zone, that is fourth zone that over here that it lies. Now, this is very, very important because ultimately we have seen that the Teesta Basin, it is it sits in the seismically active zone that is there. It is zone 4 that we are talking about, and we have the young fractured Himalayan rocks and the carbon-rich phyllite prone to the trapping gas pockets as well. Now, there is the precedent that we can see, or a disaster that have struck the Sikkim in the past, and that was in 2023, where we had the South Lonak Lake or the glacial lake outburst, and this flood have destroyed already the Teesta 3 dam and killed over 100 of the people in 2023. So this is where we are talking about the seismic zone and the kind of the dangers that it imposes over the people of the Sikkim. And here the region's second major hydropower disaster was there in just 3 years. There is also Teesta 6. This was absorbed by the public sector NHPC after its private developer became insolvent amid the cost overruns. And here we have seen that there had a disaster that have struck the tunnel because of the leakage of the methane gas. That is basically one of the important cause that had been implied in the complete disaster. Now, this is quite important because ultimately when it comes to the Teesta River, so it starts from the So Lamo Lake. All right, we have So Lamo Lake from where it starts, and it is fed by the Teesta Khangse Glacier. Now, over here you can see that we have the Chungthang, Mangan, Singtam and Rangpo from here, which actually moves, and then ultimately we have the Rangit River as well, which is its tributary, which it meets or merges with the Teesta River. Here we have the Teesta 5th dam that you can see. Then ultimately it moves towards the Teesta Bazar or Sivoke, then Siliguri, then Jalpaiguri, Rangpur, and here we have the Gajol Doba barrage and the Duani barrage as well on the river. And then ultimately it meets Jamuna or Brahmaputra as it is known in the Bangladesh. So again, there had been lots of questions related to Teesta River that had been asked in the prelims in the last years. So thereby this is quite important. Now, coming to the next news that we have for today, it is the government clarifies on the FCRA bills. So again, this is quite important because this bill, it will be tabled in the parliament in the monsoon session as had been conveyed by the government. Now, this is quite important because a new designated authority provision had been provided in the complete act, which will manage the assets of the NGOs whose FCRA registration lapses. and this has triggered the concerns for or from the minority institutions offering a live test of the civil society regulation as compared to the religious or the association freedom. Now, this is also very important to note over here that there had been around 16,200 of the associations which have remained actively FCRA registered in 2024-25. And over here, they have received roughly over 22,963 crore rupees in the foreign contributions that had happened in the 24-25. Now, this is very important because here, when it comes to the FCRA, FCRA is a Foreign Contribution Regulation Act that had been passed by the Parliament. Now, over here, it actually regulates the foreign contributions that had been done to the individuals, to the associations and the companies as well. And ultimately, this is aimed to prevent the funds which affects the India's internal security of foreign policy or the public interest as well. Now, this is the intention of the act that is there. Now, over here, when it comes to the FCRA cancellations, they are basically often administrative, and there is no filing of the return, and there is allegations of the wrongdoing as per the government's own clarification as well. So basically, when it comes to the FCRA, cancellations, they are basically because of the non-filing of the returns by the NGOs. Now, this is very important because there is a comparison which had been drawn by the government is with the global lobbying or the foreign agent regulation regimes covering the think tanks which are there, covering the universities and the companies, and not just only the NGOs. Because ultimately, when it comes to the civil society, we have seen that there had been numerous crackdowns globally as well. Now, this is very important because when it comes to the PIB, it has clarified that under the FCRA Amendment Bill 2026, the designated authority, it will be with the civil court powers that will be there, and it can take over, manage and dispose the assets which had been created by the FCRA or the foreign contributions, but only, it is very important, but only after the NGO's FCRA registration has lawfully been seized. That is, it has been suspended, it has been cancelled and not renewed as well. Now, when it comes to the religious character of the places of worship, it is legally protected in all the cases. The authorities' orders are appealable to the district judge as well. The bill, it was originally introduced on 25th March 2026, but then it was stalled by the government because there had been the concerns which had been raised by the opposition. And also this is quite important because when it comes to the complete perspective, there were the elections that had to be organized or that had to be conducted in Kerala, from where there had been major of the debates which actually emerged. So now this had been listed for the passage in the monsoon session, and let's see if this bill will pass. Now, over here, there are the, we have, earlier we have discussed about this, that there are the Christian institutions through the CBCI. They had actually raised the concern and met the Home Minister Amit Shah. Now, over here, Home Minister have assured the CBCI that the Christian NGOs, they receive under 15% of the India's total foreign donations as well. Now, over here, when it comes to the FCRA, it is very important because this complete act, it regulates the foreign funding of the associations and the NGOs, and the last major amendment that was done, it was in 2020, which actually had tightened the compliance norms or the compliance requirements. And like I said, they have, in 2024-25, there is nearly about 23,000 crore rupees, which the various NGOs, they have received through the foreign contributions. Now, coming to the next news, that is about the convergent perils, where it is about basically the Rome Declaration. Now, what this Rome Declaration is all about? We have a Nobel laureate-backed declaration which have called for a binding ban on the AI accessing the nuclear launch systems. Now, this is very important because ultimately there is a governance gap that we are talking about, just as the AI-driven military system accelerate globally. And thereby, this Rome Declaration becomes quite important because this is about the mandatory meaningful human control, where we have absolutely prohibited any automated, algorithmic or AI-driven system from making the final decision that should be that should be there in the case of the nuclear weapon systems. Now, this is, you can see where it is about the human, nature, or it is about the human decision that should be involved. Because ultimately, when it comes to the Cuban crisis of 1962 or even the 1983, the Soviet false alarm incident. So over here, there had been human hesitation alone that had averted a nuclear catastrophe that you can see. So this is a precedent where you can see that the declaration seeks to preserve that human nature or the human hesitation that should be there for the nuclear weapons that we are talking about. Now over here, this is quite important because when it comes to MAD or mutually assured destruction, so historically it had relied upon the human hesitation, diplomatic back channels and the moral pause as well. And over here, the qualities that we are talking about over here, these are certain qualities that actually AI does not possesses, or AI is, the decision window. It actually does not have these comparable qualities of the human beings. Now, this is also very important because AI systems, they are vulnerable to the hallucinations and the data poisoning as well. So, if there is any algorithm, if it gets hallucinated, or even if there is any data poisoning that happens, so what will happen is that it could misread a routine signal as an attack, and then it could actually trigger the disproportionate automated retaliation, and that is why this is quite important. Now also, existing arms control architecture that we have seen, we have the INF Treaty or the Open Skies and the New START, they have already been weakened. Where it comes to the New START, it had already lapsed, and ultimately that have raised the stakes for any new AI nuclear risk, and that is again where we are talking about the Rome Declaration. Now coming to the next important news, it is about maintaining of the status quo on the water release, says Kaveri body. Now when it comes to the most disputed river that we have in India, that is the Kaveri river. Alright, it is the most disputed river where actually you can see that when it comes to the Kaveri river, it starts emerges from Tal Kaveri, which is basically in Brahmagiri hills located in Karnataka. Now there are various rivers as well as the dams which had been constructed. We have Krishnaraj Sagar Dam, then there is Harangi River, that is again a tributary of the Kaveri River. Then we have Hemavati River as well, on which both rivers we have the dams that are named upon these tributaries. Then we have Kavani River, or over here we have a Kabini Dam. Then we have the Bhavani River, whose tributary is Moyar and the Paikara River. And again, we have the Kaveri River, which actually, it moves ahead and it gets distributed into Koleroon River as well. And then it merges with the Bay of Bengal. Now, Kaveri River had been asked in the prelims lots of times, and thereby it becomes quite important. Now, these are some of the questions that we'll be discussing for today, and they are according to the news that we have seen just right now. The first one is, with the reference with the Indian Constitution and Educational Administration, consider the following statements. First, education was transferred from the state list to the concurrent list via the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act 1978. Then second, in the case of conflict between the central law and a state law on a concurrent list subject, the central law always prevails without any exception. Then the right of children with the special needs, CWSN, to free education is protected under the Rights of the Person with Disabilities Act 2016 up to the age of 18 years. So what will be the right answer? What will be the correct answer here? I'm getting D, but D is not the right answer. Yes, it is B, that is 3 only. When it comes to the first, it is incorrect because we have the 42nd Amendment Act, which actually transferred the education to the concurrent list. The second is also not correct when it comes to the concurrent list subject. So if there is a resolution that is passed by the parliament for any state law that may prevail above the central law as well. So there is an exception, all right. And then 3 is the only one that is correct over here. So we will have the answer as B. Now, next we have consider the following geographical bodies: Gulf of Aqaba, Bab al-Mandeb, Strait of Hormuz and Mozambique. So over here, which of the above water bodies border or immediately connect to the Red Sea? So what will be the correct answer? What will be the right answer here? So its correct answer will be, I'm getting A, that is 1 and 2, that is right. Yes, it is only Gulf of Aqaba and Bab al-Mandeb. Strait of Hormuz is not over here, and even the Mozambique Channel, so we have 1 and 2 only. Now, with reference to the legal framework governing internet shutdowns in India, consider the following statements. First, the internet suspensions are currently governed under or by the Section 20 of the Telecommunication Act 2023 and the Telecommunications Temporary Suspension of Services Rule 2024. Second, under the 2024 rules, an internet suspension order issued by a competent authority can remain in force indefinitely until formally revoked. Then third, in Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India 2020 case, the Supreme Court ruled that freedom of speech and expression over the internet is a fundamental right under Article 19(1)(a). So what will be the correct answer here? What will be the correct answer for question number 3 that is on the screen? Here the right answer is B. That's again correct because the second one is incorrect. We have first and third which are true and the correct answer is B. Next, which of the following geological factors make the high Himalayas exceptionally vulnerable to subsurface tunneling disaster? First, presence of young, highly fractured rock strata subject to active tectonic deformation. Second, occurrence of carbonaceous phyllites capable of trapping pressurized methane pockets. Third, complete absence of seismic fault lines in the eastern Himalayas region. So what will be the correct answer? We have the next question, that is question number 4 on the screen. So what will be the right answer here? Yes, we have 1 and 2, that is correct answer. We have option A, that is right. Now, the Rome Declaration for an Unarmed and Disarming Peace, recently seen in the news, primarily focuses on which of the following objectives? First, banning the commercial sale of generative AI tools to non-OECD nations, prohibiting autonomous AI systems from making final decisions regarding the deployment of nuclear weapons, or establishing a global carbon tax on AI data centers in Europe, or standardizing quantum computing encryption across NATO alliance members. So what will be the correct answer? We have just, discussed about the Rome Declaration, and this is about prohibiting the autonomous AI system from making the final decisions regarding the deployment of nuclear weapons. Now coming to the next question, that we have question number 6 that is here. It is with reference to India's pharmaceutical sector and international trade. Consider the following statements. First, India accounts for nearly half of all generic prescriptions dispensed in the US by volume. Second, active pharmaceutical ingredients or API refer to the final finished dosage forms such as tablets or capsules consumed by patients. Third, the PharmExcel, that is Pharmaceutical Export Promotion Council, functions under the administrative control of Ministry of Health and the Family Welfare. Now over here, this is a start question. Start question means that you have to comment down your answer below. Alright, in the comment section, just comment your answer and let's see who will give me the right answer for this question, question number 6. Alright, so that would be all, and these are the questions that you can try for your mains examination. The first one is the centralization of public entrance examinations in a socio-economically diverse country like India risk creating institutional standardization at the expense of federal equity and local social justice. Critically discuss the statement in the light of recent challenges surrounding the National Testing Agency and the NEET. Then the second question is about economy and international trade, and that is growing protectionist trade policies in major developed economies or markets pose serious threat to India's export-driven sectors, particularly pharmaceuticals. Analyze the vulnerabilities of India's generic drug industry and suggest strategic policy measures to ensure long-term trade resilience. So these are the questions that you can try for your mains examination. And that would be all in today's session. I hope that you have liked the session. If you have seen the session so far, please do not forget to leave the like for the complete, session, as well as share the session with your friends who are preparing for the civil services, whether it is the PCS or it is the UPSC. And I will see you tomorrow at the same time, that is at 9:30 a.m. so that we can discuss the important articles that will be there in tomorrow's newspaper. So that would be all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Jai Hind, Apex and Shinobi. Thank you. I will see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.